Welcome to the Real Estate Masters Podcast, where we interview the top names in the real estate game. If you want to grow your real estate business, see more podcasts, or get free resources, go to www.REMCommunity.com. The only podcast that allows you to directly connect with the guests and many of the highest level names in the real estate game.
You are in for a treat with our next guest. Do me a favor, subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, and don't forget to go to REMCommunity.com to connect with some of the highest level real estate professionals in the United States through our community and through our high level masterminds.
All right, welcome to today's show. We have Mr. Eddie Speed on the line, the Note King. He's been in the business about 40 years, I think maybe more than 40 years, him and his students have done 3.5 billion with a B in notes. We're going to get into notes. We're going to get into how to buy notes, structure notes, owner financing, all kinds of good stuff. So welcome on the show, Eddie. It's a pleasure to have you on, and I appreciate you coming on today.
How are you, Tony?
I'm doing fantastic. We just had a really good conversation before. We should have recorded it, but we had a really good conversation before we started about what's going on with the economy, what's going to happen, how to structure notes, all that good stuff. So I guess for those that want to know a little bit more about notes, just give us a high-level perspective. I think people have heard about notes, buying notes, and that kind of thing. So just give us kind of an overview of how you teach your investors and your students how to structure notes, and then we'll kind of get into some different ways to do that.
So over the years, I've been in a lot of different aspects of the note business. I started in 1980. So in 1980, there was this huge amount of seller finance notes. Mm-hmm. And because there was so much inventory of seller finance notes, these people would be collecting payments and interest over time, but they'd wake up and find they had a need for the cash, right? Just like people selling a house have a need for the cash. So they would sell their note at a discount. And so that's how I got started. About the first 10 years in the business, predominantly I just bought notes. Mm-hmm. But I ran across real estate investors, and they wanted me to help them structure their note deals so that they could later come to me and buy their notes. And the most renowned guy that did that back in the late 80s was the guy that founded Homevestors, Ken D'Angelo. Mm-hmm. So I set up the note system for Homevestors in the early 90s. And basically, it's what I found was real estate investors didn't know what the secondary market was for a note. So the ingredients, so to speak, they cooked the pie with weren't the right ingredients. They didn't get the right down payment. They didn't have really an underwriting standard. They didn't have stuff that to us was devalued the note. So I worked backwards in saying, Mr. Real Estate Investor, you have to understand how a note person thinks or the secondary market of notes works in order to make the best note. And all along the way, I have been active in real estate. I've, owned, I can comfortably say thousands of properties that we've sold. We didn't sell all of them for seller financing. We sold a lot of them with seller financing, and we've kind of gone into deals with either seller financing when we buy it or seller financing when we sell it, or hopefully both, right? So you and I were talking about, I've been involved in a number of high volume real estate investor groups, right? The 100 house a year plus guys. And so a couple of years ago, I'm sitting there in one of these masterminds, and they're kind of crying the blues. Now, they're not making the margin they used to make. Right. They're still doing big volume, but they weren't doing big margin. And so they're saying we're making more offers, yet we're losing the customers because we have to make more offers to get one yes. So I'd ask enough high volume guys, and I know markets can be different. Phoenix can be different than Atlanta or Wichita, Kansas, or wherever, right? But overall, seems like the number is about 20, right? They make about 20 offers to get one deal accepted. And I said, doesn't that just drive you nuts? You leave 19 deals on the table? And they're like, well, yeah, but they won't take our price. And I said, pay their price. And I sort of did that knowing for a shock factor, right? I sort of did that and just left them hanging for a minute. And they're like, what do you mean pay their price? Can't make any money if we buy the property. I said, oh, you can make a killing buying it at retail. It's just a matter of how you structure, how you pay them. And so that's when it got me started. And so there were some high volume guys that said, Eddie, we desperately think we need to understand what you're doing and that we want you to really develop out some really advanced training for this stuff. And I'm like, I don't know, you know, I've hung out with a lot of high volume guys. I said, I don't really see them as being, you know, students. I don't know how trainable they'd be or whatever. And they're like, no, we'll help you. And so over the last 2 years, I really have spent a lot of energy figuring out the psychology of how to get the seller to be willing to take ridiculous terms. Mm-hmm. Because that's what it is. You know, I mean, you could take a $300,000 property and pay $500,000 for it. Just how you pay the $500,000 back, right?
Now let's stop for a second real quick, because some people may be a little confused. So when we say notes, the typical note that people buy is typically something at a discount. So let's say it's a $100,000 note, it's paid down to 80.
Yep.
For some reason, that person wants to sell the note, whether it's an owner finance or whatever it is. That $80,000 note will probably sell at a discount depending on the interest rate. So someone may buy it for $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, whatever their motivation is. And depending on the situation of whoever's paying that note on the other side, right? So that's that side of it. And that's the education that I've seen and I've heard over many years. And so what you're talking about, I think, is probably a little new to people unless they followed some of the gurus back probably 10, 15 years ago that used to teach some of this, you know, for a short amount of time. So what you're talking about now is when you're when you're buying a property, structuring a note with the seller to where you can pay their price. It's just that they are going to be the bank or part of the bank at a certain interest rate to make that deal work.
That's correct.
Right.
And hopefully what you redo is you buy it under terms where your debt service is fairly small, right? And then you resell it and you owner finance it on the flip side. So now you then do a wrap note and you're collecting a payment every month, which is when you sold it, what they owe you. Mm-hmm. And then you have debt service every month, which is the seller financing or any underlying financing that you have. So people say, well, why is what you teach different, Eddie? And it is because we have been for 40 years in the note buying business. What you just said, right? In fact, we price 3,000 one-off notes a year. So notes that come from mom and pop real estate investors, we price 3,000 of them a year.
When you say price, you're saying you make an offer on them, or you help?
Note brokers bring us deals every day of the week, right? Mm-hmm. So we have a trade desk. So people bring us note deals where some mom and pop seller financed a house, could be in Iowa, could be in Florida, could be in Connecticut, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a network of note brokers around the country. I've had a fairly big footprint in that industry, right? So I've trained a lot of people. And so they bring us these notes and we have capital and we buy these notes, right? So what I learned is to study how the guy that carried owner financing, how they think. What's reasonable to them. And then that influenced me in how I could show a real estate investor how to make an offer. So the real estate investor, the typical guy like you and I were talking about, he kind of staggers in there and he says, okay, I'll pay you back and I'm going to pay you principal only payments. Well, that's another way of saying no interest, right? Mm-hmm. And he's sort of off balance when he does it. And he's like, oh, well, then nobody will ever take it. That's because you said it wrong, right? So what I've had to do is to go into the psychology of how somebody that seller finances thinks, right? Once you get into their mindset and how they think, you start realizing what's normal to them is not normal. It's just normal to them, okay? So let me give you some stats, okay? Mom and pop seller finance notes. These are not real estate investors. It's not like you owner financed a property or Mitch Stephen owner financed a property. That's not what we're talking about, right? We're just talking about the regular guy, right? That owner finances one property his whole life, mom and pop. The average interest rate on those notes is 4%.
Wow.
Okay. Now this is This is 3,000 one-off notes a year. We got a fair amount of data. Okay.
Right.
The average down payment is 0 to 5,000 down on 1/3. So 1/3 of all of the seller financing we price, they pay 5,000, 0 to 5,000 down. 1 in 500 of those notes has a credit report on the guy they owe the money to. So see,
Only 1 in 500.
Underwriting means nothing to them, right? So I teach a different concept. I know where their pain is, and I solve their pain. I know they're going to have to give up something. So I already kind of know they're not going to want 8% interest like a real estate investor. They're going to want 2.5% interest, 4% interest, something like that. But I can get them to agree to 1 or 2% interest or no percent interest for the first half of the loan. And then I'll say, if you'll carry it for the full 20-year term, because that's what I need you to do, then I'll pay you more interest than you ever thought you wanted.
And when you say them, you're talking about the seller of the properties.
That's it.
Right. So if someone comes to me or any real estate investor and they say, I want $80,000 for this house, and let's say for round numbers, it needs $10,000 in repairs, and it's worth $100,000 after you're done fixing it up.
Yep.
Those numbers, well, actually, let's say $70,000. You put $10,000 into it, then you'd have $80,000, and it's worth $100,000. Now, the typical real estate investor would say, or excuse me, the experienced real estate investor would say that's not a deal, because by the time you pay real estate commissions, holding costs, your team, all that kind of stuff, that eats up all the profits, and you maybe have a loss. So rather than doing a $70,000 purchase with your own money or an investor's money, that's when you would go to the seller and say, okay, I'll give you your $70,000, but how would you structure that deal? Like, how would you talk that seller into taking your terms on an owner carry and structuring that deal, just so we know how it works?
Okay. Well, the first thing is, I don't have generic offers. I know that most anybody that used to teach this gave you some generic blueprint and just lay that over the top of every deal. To me, that is a very limited way to do the business. It's not very creative if you have one structure, right? What I teach is, the first thing I say is, Tony, let's be real clear with each other, okay? I want to get you the price you need, and you understand you're going to have to work with me and how I pay you back in order to do that. But you got to give me one true, real answer. What are your immediate cash needs? So once you come, I didn't ask you what the down payment you wanted, right? I asked you what your immediate cash needs are. I'm not going to pay you anything down. You know that $10,000 in rehab money you need? And let's just say that you said, I have to have $20,000. That's $30,000. That's a $30,000 private mortgage, and I'm going to get you subordinate and carry a seller second. If you said you only needed $10,000 down, I could start paying you quicker. But if you needed $20,000 down, then we're going to have to structure more extreme terms on your piece of seller financing. So it's a balancing scale, right? I listen to the customer and I back into what they need, right? And once again, you know, I can pay you the full price of your equity, Tony, but if I do that, I have to pay you over time. Okay. Now that's another way of saying a no interest rate loan, right? But what you have to do is give them a reason that sounds reasonable to them. So you have, the easiest thing in the world, the easiest comparison that everybody can relate to is furniture company, right? You know, the furniture company, they sell their furniture for retail and they don't charge any interest on it. But believe me, they're not losing money. And that's the smart way, I think, to sell a piece of property, is to sell it like the furniture company sells furniture. So you have to do things that they're calling their brother and telling them how smart they were, right? That all these other fools are selling your house at a discount and they got retail. They're just like the furniture company. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So the other thing is I've learned that I'm not too hung up on interest. It's how you pay the interest. If you pay no interest or low interest up front and step the interest up, then even if you think you're paying too much interest, you amortize the loan down with the low interest or no interest up front. The amount of principal 10 years down the road that you're paying the higher interest rate on is way less principal amount. So your net effect is your payment's still lower.
So going back to that $70,000 example. So 70,000 is what they want. You need 10,000 in repairs. It's worth 100,000. Typically not a deal, because by the time you pay the 10% to your private investor, or even if you go to the bank and borrow 6% money, it still eats up the profit. So going back to that deal, so 70,000, you would either have them subordinate part or all of that 70,000 so that you can borrow money as a first to get the deal done, and then have the second part or even a really good chunk of it at a low interest rate. That way you can either rent the property and have that cash flow, and all of what you're paying, if you make any payments, is going to go down towards the principal. And then what you said is stair stepping. So you may do 1%, 0%, whatever it is for the first year to 4 years. But if you're making principal payments for that amount of time, that's all going towards the principal. And then by the time you have a higher interest rate at 4%, 5%, 6%, whatever the seller wants down the road, it's a much smaller chunk of money and allows you to buy that property compared to not.
Here's what we've learned. We've looked at hundreds of thousands of seller finance notes. So we had to be in the psychology business to understand how the guy that owns a note thinks, because we're trying to buy his asset at a discount, just like you're trying to buy a house at a discount, right? Mm-hmm. So if you don't have any understanding of the psychology of how seller thinks, you're going to have a difficult time trying to deal with them, right? Mm-hmm. So what I've learned is this. They will agree to crazy things if you can address with them why that you can do what you can do. And once again, you know, in your analogy, you're still trying to buy the house at a discount. Listen, I can structure terms where I can pay full retail and it doesn't matter at all, because my debt service is way below normal debt service. You can buy a house at a discount and your debt service is X. I can buy a house at retail and my debt service is 60% of what your payment would have been. So the way that you structure the financing, in other words, think of it as there's wholesale price and there's wholesale terms. So what we've been talking about is the concept of buying on wholesale terms. Now, guys will say, yeah, I know, man, but that's just complicated and stuff. Listen, getting rich isn't always easy. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to get rich, but you got to go find an angle, because to me, how much money do you burn, or some real estate investor burn, going and finding 20 legitimate leads, and running a business and all the marketing and all it takes to make that happen, and look and say, man, I bought 1 out of 20.
So tell me what you're feeling, Eddie. You know, so for those, you know, when you do direct marketing for properties, it typically takes you about 20 deals that you look at and potentially make offers on for you to get one, you know, for whatever reason. The seller owes too much, they're just unreasonable, they want too much, whatever it is. So tell us, out of those 20, how many do you think with your structure that real estate investors can take those 19 that weren't deals and make those deals?
I have found that of those 19, that between 5 and 8 of those 19, there is the right bones to the deal to make an offer, right? Mm-hmm. And you can buy 1 out of those. So literally you could buy 2 out of 20 versus 1 out of 20. You can double your conversion. And, you know,
that's a big deal. I mean, if someone's doing 40 houses a year, by structuring and being a little bit smarter, they can do potentially 80 deals a year. So instead of having to double their marketing to get the same amount of deals, they just take the amount of deals the amount of leads they're already getting, and just come up with a more creative way to structure the deal.
So here's the concern, right? Most real estate investors say, the reason I don't want to do that, Eddie, is I know you teach wealth, but I have to make transactional money. Mm-hmm. right? And I'm like, okay, well, what if I can almost show you every time how to make the same transactional money you could have made flipping the house up front, and then get a check for 20 years, which is going to make your profit probably 4 times bigger than it ever would have been. Right? So the reason, it's very simple, right? You buy it on terms and you resell it on a wrap note. So Tony, right now, today, 35% of the people that could get a mortgage in February of this year cannot get a mortgage today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? This month, well, excuse me, the statistics from last month. Let's go 1 month back because I have those statistics. And by the way, you can go to elliemay.com and source my information, okay? So Ellie Mae is a software company that gathers software on basically every loan origination out there. Fannie, Freddie, FHA, VA. Average down payment paid last month on a purchase, not on a refi, but on a purchase was 17%. The average down payment that everybody that got a Fannie, Freddie, FHA, VA loan last month was 17%. So this has left this gigantic hole of people that I call a deserving buyer, right? So the real estate investor, I understand that to run this high volume business or even a low volume business, right? You got to go, you feel like you have to cash a check today in order to survive. So in this very house that we just described, I'm going to resell it and get 17,000 down, right?
So, but let's talk about retail value to the other side. So in a typical retail sale to a buyer that's going to get a loan with a bank, you can sell that for 100,000. So would you recommend when you seller finance it, especially since it's going to be a longer term, to potentially add a premium on top of that?
Well, let me just tell you that you and Mr. Dodd-Frank are not going to get along as great friends if you say you're going to oversell a piece of property. Okay.
So as long as you can substantiate that with sales.
You can sell it for retail. You can't sell it for more than retail. Okay. Right. So you may could sell it for 105, but I teach, here's what I teach. I teach buying a superior piece of property and selling it to a superior buyer with owner financing. I don't teach buying substandard real estate and going and finding somebody with he and his wife combined credit score of 700, right?
Right.
Their FICO scores combined are 700. I don't teach that because it's junk.
Yeah.
It won't pay. It won't be good to you. So here's the catch. If you're going to go down the lane that I'm suggesting, the way that you buy it and the way that you configure the financing when you buy it has all to do with the ability to do it, right? So it's a process that I understand. When you see case studies, that it sells the picture because you just can see the math and you can see exactly how it works.
Right.
But equal along with whiteboarding the math, and that's important. I'm not saying that it's not, but along with whiteboarding the math, the more important thing is structuring the deal in a way that sounds like the seller, to them, it's what they want to do. So you don't just, you have to go find out what's important to them. And once again, the takeaway is always, you can always sell your property and get all your cash today if taking a discount is okay with you.
So let me ask you this, speaking of Dodd-Frank, if you're selling a property on owner carry terms, you're technically becoming a quote unquote bank. What is your thought on licensing? Because there are many different perspectives on this. Do you feel, and it may vary on state a little bit, but what are your thoughts on people being licensed mortgage brokers in order to do that?
So yes, if you're a commercial real estate dealer, right? And Dodd-Frank defines that as 3 or more transactions in a year, then you're a lender and you fall under Dodd-Frank. I don't know any high volume real estate investor that generates a lot of seller financing that is their own internal residential mortgage loan originator. Mm-hmm. You can't, that's a terrible thing to try to go figure out. Just go hire out the license. right? You don't need to have the license internally. It's not your core competency. It's not my core competency. So hire out the license. It's nothing to it. You'll create better loans because they are underwritten. They are vetted. They are whatever. You don't have to underwrite to Fannie Mae standards. You can
and then you just pay them a fee to do the paperwork and use their license.
100%. That's the way every high volume guy I know does it. So understand, you hire out the license, just like I can hire an attorney to, do legal work for me, or an accountant to do accounting work, right? And because it does go through an RMLO, then you're going to end up with better quality, better vetted loans. And so it's just going to be good for you. It's going to be the bank that's going to pay you for a long time in the future. So doing this for a lot of high volume guys, I've heard the same thing over and over and over. We have to make transaction money. We can't just bet on the future. I'm like, okay, then you get a big down payment and you just solved your problem.
And with real estate investors, fix and flip guys, your high volume guys, most of them do probably renovations on the properties, but there are some that just buy the property, they don't do renovations, or they do just enough to make it livable, and then they sell it on terms. What do you see most of your guys do? Do they typically do the full renovations? Do they sell it as is? Like, what is their model on that side of it?
Well, I've bought tens of thousands of notes. I've looked at hundreds of thousands of notes. Statistically, the guy that buys a house that's not repaired sucks as a buyer. That's just been my life experience.
Yeah.
There are exceptions to that. Okay. So I'm not giving you 100% rule on that, but I'm saying to you that that is not what we teach, because unless they're sitting there with real cash in the bank and a real competency to go repair that property, and you can make sure it's done in a proper industry standard workmanlike manner, then you're going to find out that their construction work is not improving the value of the house. It's deteriorating the value of your house, or they didn't fix it. And now all of a sudden, whatever's wrong with the house, they wake up one day and just give up on their dream. So I'm not for that. That's not building everything that I want to do is focused on building a bank that will pay me back 20 years in the future, right? In other words, so I have to find a good buyer that loves the house is great, and then all of a sudden I got a winner.
Yeah, because I do know at least two guys that will buy properties, clean them up, not livable or maybe just on the borderline of livable, and sell them off on owner financing, so they have pretty much no money out of pocket on the repairs. And they've been very successful in it. You say no. I've probably done that with, 10 to 20 properties, somewhere in that range. And it's about 50-50. 50% of them fix up the house, they take care of it. The other 50%, they move into it. And like you said, they either deteriorate it more, or they start doing demo and they don't finish the project. So for those of you thinking, which way should you go? I think it depends on your process. I think it depends on your market. I think it depends on your price point. There's a lot of different variables.
Tony, if I told you, I will ask you if you want to invest stock in my bank, and I told you I made 50% of the loans I made were really good and 50% of them weren't so good, would you want to invest in my bank?
Well, the thing is that those properties that they did not fix or did not go well, I still got the property back, ended up making money on it.
That's a terrible business. I've seen my career. I bought 1,000 portfolios of seller finance notes. I've looked at 5,000 or 6,000. Okay. I spent my career seeing people that now got gray hair like me, that thought they owned a business. They thought they owned a portfolio and found out they owned a business, and they couldn't retire. So they had a bunch of junky notes that they had. They're slumlords for notes. They had a bunch of junky notes. They had to keep them propped up all the time. And I'm just telling you, there's no peace in that. So to tell you, a young, smart young man, that is a business and not a portfolio.
Well, it depends on how you look at it, because the way I run my business is a business, and I've got contractors, I've got a team that can manage that. I'm not looking to just buy hundreds of these and sell them off and not do anything to them. So we have different philosophies. We may agree to disagree, but it just depends on how you run your business, the properties, and what you want to do with them. But for me, the reason that I like that is because it gives them equity as well. It keeps less repairs that I have to do on the and again, I've only done 10 to 20 of them. I just dabbled in it. Sometimes people come to me and say, hey, I want to fix her up, or I want to move into it and renovate it. So it's not a true business model that I've come up with. It just happened to kind of fall in my lap. 50% of the time it works, and 50% of the time it doesn't. So wrapping up here. So this is some really good stuff. So for those that I guess are in the business and doing high volume or doing any volume at all, it seems like you could potentially do a lot more deals, or potentially double your deals by coming up with a good strategy to do these deals and do them creatively. For those that are getting into the business, it is very cutthroat. There are so many people wanting to do deals. So I guess this could be a way for those that are not able to do deals because it's so competitive and start out to potentially start doing deals. Would you recommend that? Like, someone starting out, would you recommend them doing this creative process? Because there are a lot of different variables in the mix.
Well, I think the answer is you can get into the business easier if you specialize in buying on terms. Because I can go to you, Tony, and say, just give me your 19 dead leads, and we'll agree, and we'll paper it up correctly. But I'm going to pay you something if I close. If I don't close, then it's still in the trash can. But if I can go rescue a deal from your trash can, wouldn't you give me a lead and let me go try?
Wow, I like that. Because because you could go to, especially in a big market, you could go to the 10, even 5 top wholesalers in your area and probably source hundreds of leads, like you said, that aren't being done, that could potentially be done. So I like that. Trash can leads.
Yeah. So that's one of the strategies that I try to do, is to say, look, well, think of it in terms of this. I'm not trying to take anybody away from the successful business they're doing, buying a house for cash. Mm-hmm. That's a successful piece of their business. They continue to do that. Whether you rent them, you wholesale them, you fix and flip them, you do whatever you want to. I will argue with you that I have met more people that have seller finance properties than anybody in the United States.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Okay. So I believe what I believe about who you sell to and the conditions you sell to them and their investment and how you underwrite the chances of that loan paying back, right? I'll argue that you have 20 houses of experience, and I've seen several 100,000 notes, right? So I can tell you statistically, I believe that I'm right. And once again, if I can show you how to do all the things the way I'm doing it, and you end up getting a better check, more consistent money, then you're happy. You don't have to go figure out how to go solve a problem, right? So those are just things that I think I could get you comfortable in saying, oh, okay, I can go sell it like this, right? In other words, people don't know what they don't know until they see it, right?
Yeah.
But on the other side, a small guy that enters in a high volume guy, to me, should add this to their business. The only reason they would never add this to their business is they're like, oh my God, this is a whole new thing, and I got to go learn how to do it. Mm-hmm. So this is why I teach the other side. I go train high volume guys, and then I go train guys that aren't high volume, but they're smart. And this is a piece of the business. They have to learn it just like everything else. But here's the case is, he becomes their designated hitter. He comes in to go work at the trash can leads that otherwise they're going to not make money on. And so that's where I've kind of seen myself as kind of really solving an industry problem, because I've trained a lot of high volume guys. When they come down the road with us, they're like, oh my God, I can totally see that. That's really cool. But then they go, oops, I got a high volume business. I can't add this. My acquisition guys can't do this, blah, blah, blah. And so I had to go develop a strategy for it. Yeah. Actually, I came up with the idea from a guy that really has pioneered more of the house wholesaling business than any other single guy. And this is John Martinez, guy that teaches negotiations.
Yeah.
And so me expressing to him, he's known me for years, and me expressing to him where my roadblock was, then he says, well, just go train another guy to go do that and have them just pass the lead on. And there you go. Solve a big problem.
Very nice. So I'm guessing, do you have online training, Eddie, that we'll put a link down below. I'll get that link from you and we'll put it down below. I'm guessing you have training that people can get a hold of that they can buy to get the paperwork, get the strategy and all that good stuff, right?
I do. There's a fairly simple way to get started. I wrote a book, and it's been since the virus. We modified it after the virus, and it's about 50 pages. It's an ebook, but it's pretty solid. It's got about 5 paragraphs in it, and it gives some good ideas of how to do it. And then it also registers them for, I don't know, probably about an hour or 90-minute training, so they can see some case studies and get more of an idea of how to go do it. So the idea is, if somebody the one thing is somebody says, you know what, if I could dig some deals out of the trash can, I would love to figure out how to do that. If I can get somebody at that point, then all of a sudden we just start giving them examples and it makes sense.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time, Eddie. I love doing this because our listeners love good new ideas. I always love good ideas that I'll take back to my team. So I'll definitely dig into this and see if we can't double our deal volume. So thanks, Eddie. You've been in the industry a long time. You're a legend, and we appreciate your time and look forward to catching up again soon.
All right. Thank you, my friend.
All right. Thanks, Eddie.
Thanks for listening. Now go to www.remcommunity.com to connect with today's guest, see our high-level masterminds, and to get free resources. Don't forget to share this with a friend and leave us a 5-star review. We'll see you on the next episode.